Welcome to the podcast where we discuss all matters financial planning and investing. This content contains general information only and may not be relevant to everyone. Please contact our office to make sure and determine if this is relevant for you. Hi and welcome to the podcast. I'm David Loughlin and I'm joined with my co-host Cole Eccles. How are you, Cole?
Good yourself there?
Good. Today we're actually talking about something that I think a lot of people can be a bit scared of or terrified of and probably haven't done before, is actually either reached out to a financial planner and or came into a financial planning office and what to expect.
Yeah.
It's real. I find it can be confronting from people because it's not out there like you can buy a couch, you can buy a car and all these sort of things, really specifically what you're getting. With financial planning, it's more about the intangibles, isn't it?
Yeah. And a lot of people, how many phone calls do we have? I think everyone's heard the term financial plan or financial planner, but so many times you go and they go, so what do you do? Can you explain exactly what you do? So there's a lot of, not a misconception, misunderstanding or not knowing of what's involved. Yeah, and like you said, it's because there's nothing, you're not buying something that you can hold or touch or feel, whatever. It's just that, they're really intangible, so that people are not really sure what we can do or what we do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It should be, I wish it was more broadly known what people do. Like you've got terms like financial planner, financial advisor, then there's a whole bunch of other sort of people in this space, especially online and all those type of things, talking about finance stuff where they're not actually financial planners.
Yeah.
Or things like they don't have a license, so they're not backed up by a lot of things. So there can be a lot of misconceptions about what they do, how they help, and where they actually came into it.
I think I like to think about it like a lot of those people, like the stuff you see online, are people that are selling not a product, but maybe a solution. Like advise, I think it's more about the strategy, like what you're going to do, and then to implement that, you need something, whether it's investing or property or shares, whatever. But it's sort of where a lot of those solutions are, they're just telling you the end, I suppose, something that's going to facilitate what you're trying to achieve. Whereas financial planning is getting that strategy around, what it is you want to achieve. And it always comes back to it's what the individual wants. Like it's always, that's first and by law, you've got to be first and foremost is what that individual wants. And that's everything that you say or do advise is around what that person wants and that it's in their best interest.
Yeah. There's no such thing as, I find it, I think there was a good thing online about the other day. There's no such thing as cheap financial plans anymore or cheap advice as such, because we've got to take into account all their details. We've got to be holistic about the approach, and it's got to be, whatever we're suggesting they do has got to fit their purpose and their goals and needs and so forth, whether they like it or not.
That's
so
right.
If they're just after a little bit of advice, that's probably the most dangerous thing, because we can't just give you a little bit of advice. So it's a little bit different. But before we get into that, I want to touch on what happens if you don't actually get someone to help you as from a financial standpoint. What I find is so many people get paralyzed and do nothing.
Yeah.
So they know that, especially the people we deal with when they're sort of hitting their 40s or early 50s, and then once they even get into their 60s, they know that they should be doing more with their super. They know they should probably pay down their debt some more. They know that they could invest into the share market or a property investment. And so they know all these things, but they don't implement enough, or if any.
That's right.
So the cost of actually not getting someone to help you, I think there's two sides of financial planning. There's the advice side of things, but then there's the implementation.
Yeah.
There's so many, experts out there to tell you to do this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, if you're not implementing anything, you're not getting anywhere.
That's right. And it's also, there's so much information and people who's giving advice or what things you should do, but that may not necessarily be the best for you. And we had in this office, one of someone that you had met, a client you had met, and they spoke about their parents' experience where they've gone and paid their home off because they felt, that's what you got to do. And they end up in a situation where, yes, they've paid the home off, they've retired, and they've got no assets to support an income, and they've got a $1.5 million house, and now they're struggling to survive because of no income. So it's like there's other things like, was it the best thing? Could you do something differently? So it's I think people just, you, I suppose, take things, or your parents tell you to do things, and I've seen it in my friendship group as well. People do things that they probably shouldn't have done, and then it's too late. So it's
those missed opportunities and doing the wrong things, because mistakes cost you a fortune, let's be honest, and actually hold you back and paralyze you from doing anything else. Like I had a potential client come into the meeting today. It's pretty much what we're talking about. She's got a lot of scenarios going on, like in a solid position, early 40s, there's a fair bit going on financially, and then it's like, what is the next move?
Yeah.
And there's pretty much in this scenario, there's no straightforward answer. It's more like we could model down this track, we could model down that track, and, there's actually 3 tracks that we could go down. But it comes back to, bringing it back to, in her case, it was more like, what's the cash flow? What have we got left over? What are really the main goals that we're actually after trying to achieve before we start digging into the strategy?
Yeah.
Because it's no use having strategy if you don't know what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And I think we get a lot where people have taken themselves to a certain point and they've done well, but they don't know. It's like, well, I want to go to the next step. And like you said, it's, a lot of them are doing things, but they don't. Like, how many people do you speak to? I want to do something. It's like, okay, so why do you want to do that? And then you talk a bit further and they don't. There's no real reason why they should, or they don't really know why. They just think they should be doing that because they've read it or heard it or whatever it may be.
I find it's just so confusing because, like, at the end of the day, you can Google anything these days. Doesn't matter that's what you should do. Doesn't mean that's what you should do. And it's very time consuming. If you haven't seen hundreds of cases, we're lucky enough we've seen hundreds and hundreds of cases. So we've got sort of the backstory on what works, what doesn't work. A lot of people don't have that information, so they really get stuck. And what I find is really not planning costs you millions of dollars. Yep. Generally, that is the reality. We done a plan last week. I think it was last week where just making one small change to one of the person's superannuation over a 15-year period, there was $500,000 difference. Just on one side, just on the wife side of things, let alone the husbands and all the other bits and pieces. That was just from one decision or one sort of thing that could have happened that won't, unless it's intervene and someone, make sure they do it and all that sort of stuff. So I think really the time and energy that goes into researching stuff, and I'm worse for it. Like if I'm going into something else, I'll study the, right down to the bottom line, spend hours, and I'm like, I should have just paid that guy to do it, So especially when it comes to financial planning, it's one of those things that really having someone on your side can make a massive difference.
Yeah, that's right. It's like, and, we look at it sort of our client base is you can only... Like there's only so many hours in the day and, people want to spend time with their families. Do you really want to be? I always look at people, I've been around for a while and you get clients that say, I'm going to start a self-managed super fund. I'm going to manage my portfolio in retirement. It's like, so you're always going to work until 65 and then spend 8 hours a day trying to manage your own, an issue about enjoying life. So there's, and I think we do find a lot with people, I suppose, get to a point where, it becomes too time consuming and they want to go to the next step and they don't know. And it's, I think, I've been around for a while and there used to be a saying, there's still a saying, I suppose, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah. It's very true. And it comes down to now, what are you actually paying for? Oh, there goes that. When it comes down to, what actually goes into the backer plans, because a lot of people don't know, it's the intangible. So from an hours perspective, how many hours do you think goes into a plan and implementing its sort of initial plan?
Oh, well, if you go from the very first meeting, there's probably, 4 hours of meetings before you even go down to the point of actually starting the plan. And then it's, going through client situation, coming up with the strategy, doing a bit of research, doing all the modelling, etc. You 80 hours, 100 hours, and then you've got to come back to the client, present that advice, and they're going to implement that, and that can take even more time. So, it's not. I think sometimes I speak to people on the phone, they expect you speak for 10 minutes, they want you to tell them there and then we know what you do. But it's like there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, that's what I find. Like you've got different levels. So you've got advisors that need to do their part, and then you've got sort of paraplanning. So there's all the modelling and stuff, and then there's a document. Like a lot of people don't know, there's generally what's called a statement of advice, which is about 80 pages long, just roughly, with all information, which takes a lot of time and care, and it goes into all the facts and figures and gets into the detail and really projects what everything is going to be. Yeah. And then you've got implementing the advice and changing things and setting things up and investing. There's just a mountain of work. Like if you looked at it, if any person if you went to work for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, even can take 4 weeks sometimes, what would you earn over that? So if you actually think of it that way, well, if I've got someone doing 3 or 4 weeks work for me, what would that cost? Do you know what I mean? So it's not going to be $1,000 or $2,000. And even the sort of the minimum out there for these days is minimum of like the cheapest financial planner you probably could ever find, and it's only on a very minimal thing, is probably around $5,000 these days. Most firms are up around sort of 7 to 8, 9, 10,000, sort of on average, and then you've got the ones where when you're dealing with high net worth clients, could be 100,000 or 200,000, or $1 million, depending on what the scenarios are. So, but most people fall into the category of probably getting started around sort of under 10 grand, and then on an ongoing basis, sort of there's anything sort of from 5 to 500 grand,
Yeah.
you know. So it just depends on people's scenarios, and it depends on what value someone can get out of it. So, in initial planning, there's the time wise, you know, there's the amount of time that goes into it, and then it's, you know, financial planning. There's a lot of business costs as well these days. To be a licensed financial planner these days, there's a minimum. You got bits and pieces, probably 60,000.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. People don't. When I speak to people, like, I speak to real estate agents, I think it's a couple of thousand to have your license. I got mates who are electricians, and when you say to them, you know, you're looking at around 50, 60,000, you know, you're in the red from day one before you've even actually done anything.
Yeah.
They can't quite fathom.
Yeah,
it costs so much.
When you're the business owner and then you have second advisors like yourself, you know, my licensing and bits and pieces would be, around that 50, 60 grand, and the second person would, with the bits and pieces we need, about 40. So it's like there's 100,000 going out for licensing costs before we even do anything or see anyone. And then there's another issue that we've got to spend a week on learnings through the year that no one pays you for. So there's a backstop. Also, we've got to pay other fees like ASIC levies, and then there's even other fees that come onto it. It just feels like there's so many fees that go on in financial planning. So that's why it's actually hard to start up the business in financial planning these days. Just the costs, you know, are out of control. And then you've got different types of planners who charge differently. So some people have flat fees, like generally we're flat fee to can be percentage depending on what the scenario is. So we've got a dual model that we can use in certain times. And you know, I find it's making that investment. It's like, at the end of the day, if your plan costs you 10 grand to get started, for argument's sake, at the end of the day, that initial plan is worth a huge amount of money. If you just implemented that plan and followed to it, for most people, there's going to be considerable differences and changes, and it's worth, you know, every day. But it's actually hard because you don't get the money back tomorrow. You know, what's my return on investment? But that comes into, you know, what are you actually paying for when it comes to sort of peace of mind?
Yeah, and it's, you know, I remember the different ways people used to think about it. Like, you know, you got your own like chief investment officer. It's just about that. And I've come across it so many times, like, you know, people where, like I think you mentioned before, it's that peace of mind, just knowing that someone's on your side and someone who's seen a lot more than you in terms of individual situations and what's potentially possible for you, is like, that's almost, wouldn't say
gold.
Yeah, it's like, you know, it's just, I mean, like we had a client that came to the side of the end and felt the situation was hopeless. They couldn't do this, and you know, it was so dire and down. And then, you know, you do the plan, and then it's like everyone's, and they're upbeating, and it's like, how do you put a figure on that? So it's that, having that peace of mind. The problem is, it's because it's like you said at the start, it's because it's intangible. You can't point at something and go, yep, that's what I've got. But over time, that's when the results show.
Yeah, and it comes down to like making sure you're doing the right strategy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Most people are frozen and not doing any strategy, let's be honest.
Yeah.
So, you know, there is a few that will, you know, DIYs that will do it, but majority won't unless they've got someone doing it and coaching them and making sure that, you know, the strategy is useless if there's no implementation.
That's the key. It's like, we speak to people, go, oh, can you just tell me what to do? And then we say to them, well, it's almost no point, because if you don't do it, then you've just, that investment you've made is, it's worthless, the 10,000 whatever you spend on that plan, because people won't follow it through. You've got to keep pushing them.
100%. And you really get the most value in year 2, year 3, year 4. Every year you go on, you get more and more value because you're making more and more money.
Yeah.
You know, we've got, you know, so many clients that have, you know, started with, you know, doing okay, but, you know, hit over the $1 million mark now, you know, and they're keep growing and it just gets easier and easier, but you've got to start somewhere. You know, I always talk about, you know, you're trying to get to that position where you're moving forward, you know, minimum 50,000 a year, and then hopefully 100, 200, 300, 400, whatever it may be, is when you're doing the right things, they compound.
Yeah.
And when you do the wrong things, they compound as well. Or if you do nothing, right, that compounds. So really having the long-term vision, I think, with financial planning is crucial, but also implementing the small steps.
Yeah.
And that goes from controlling your cash flow. It's some sort of sacrifice, right? If you're not spending all your money, it's some sort of sacrifice. And then it's going to the right investments. Well, you know, for a lot of people early on, super is one of those things people are like, oh shit, if I put that away, I can't touch it.
Yeah.
Well, as we get older, it's like, well, it's not that far away, you know? So making sure that we're implementing that, or paying down debt, or buying other assets, what, you know, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where financial planning is so broad, and it's just, there's so much out there. A lot of people sort of don't know what we actually can provide advice on,
Yeah.
So there's some of the things that they're sort of paying for. But the areas of financial advice, what are the areas we can provide some advice on?
So like everyone, we don't. A lot of people don't like to use the word retirement. We don't like to talk about it as well. But at the end of the day, everyone's building assets to the point where they can stop working or got this.
Independence.
Yeah. So to get, and what we do is to get people to that point is obviously you want to build your assets out. So whether it's super investments outside of super, property, whatever, and then we say to people, so when we're building assets out, that's fine, but everything that underpins all that is cash flow. So you build your income. So you need to look at their, personal insurances, make sure they've got those risks covered off or financial risks covered off. So super insurance, investments. We don't like to think about death, but everyone will die eventually. So how does, if you built all this wealth up and assets up, how do you want that distributed beyond your death? So look at estate planning. What's we got? So cash flow and budgeting. That's probably the first thing we start with, cash flow and budgeting, because that helps every other step beyond that.
Yeah, so there's just so many areas. Like if you just talk about super, there's, what company should it be with? What investment should it be with? What are the contribution strategies? What does it look like? How do you draw that down? What's the difference between account-based pension, age pension, all this stuff? So there's a whole minefield. A lot of people don't understand super, and that's going to be one of the biggest drivers as most people retirement. Then you've got, when it comes to investment property, so we can't tell a person to select. We can't select the actual property for anybody, but we can model it in their overall plan, how their cash flow works and all that. And obviously they can select the property themselves or get a buyer's agent, all those type of things. And then you've got, into the share market where we look after all of our clients' shares, but making sure the strategy is right. So whether you're using debt recycling, whether, you've paid off your loan and then you can just invest, and then depending on what the purpose of it is. So like investments goes from, then if you're a business owner, I run into a lot of business owners that have huge opportunities they don't know about, and then I start working with their accountants to say, look, we can move things around a little bit. We can get a whole bunch of money. We can pay a lot less tax just because there's a lot of things that most people don't know in that area. And then, you move into making sure they're protected and all that. Most people are underprotected, let's be honest, and no one wants to pay for it. It is what it is. So making sure that's all sorted out. But, at some stage we need our debt gone, and we're notorious for adding more debt, not really getting rid of it. So it's like at some point that's got to be done. And that can be done in multiple ways. It's not just one way. You can grow assets to pay it off, which generally is a bit more aggressive. You can just pay it off. There's a whole, a list of ways. So when anyone comes to us, it's not about just one thing. I'm not just coming for a little bit of financial advice. For going to a financial planner, you're actually after, it's a commitment. Yeah,
but I think a lot of people come in with that. I've got one problem that needs to be addressed, but everything's got a sort of a flow-on effect. Yeah. And by law, we can't just, if we know, you can't just focus on one thing when you know there's other things that it affects. You have to address all that. But a lot of people come in, and like you said, is when you start talking to them, they may come of, I've got this problem. But then you start talking and finding a bit more about them or that, and then it starts to expand. And then sometimes, like you said, they don't know what they don't know. So they think it's that problem, but when you talk to them, there's other problems.
Yeah, it's like when they walk in the door, they think, oh shit, I've got to do all these things. I don't know. But lucky when they come to us, they don't have to do much, to be honest. Like they've really got to, and we sort of drag it out of them. What are their goals? Or in an ideal world, what would it be? Yep. And sometimes they don't know. And I always say, well, if you don't know, even if you didn't know, what do you think it could look like? Yeah. So at the end of the day, we can just really get some goals because they don't actually know what's achievable for themselves. They've generally got one problem, but there's a whole bunch of other problems stopping that. Yeah, and then once you really identify those goals, the strategies and everything become clear. Yeah. And really getting rid of the, most people are going, okay, what we run into. And then it's like, how do we do much better? Yeah. And they're stuck and limited in what they know. And if you stay in that space, you're never going to grow, or you're never going to be able to maximize it. It's like, getting to a position where you can pay a little bit of money and have an expert on your side, for me, it's just a no-brainer. Yeah. And I look at some clients and I've seen before where they go, oh shit, is it worth doing? I go, well, just have a look at the results that you've achieved. Yeah. Do you think it's been worth it? Yeah. And it's every day of the week that, for most people, it's not for everybody, but for most people, going to do exceptionally well having someone on their side. So we only take on clients we can help. So there's plenty of people that I say, look, I can't help you, and our fees don't match, what the position you're in, and would just cost you money, which that's not our intention. We're never going to do that. So we're just here to help people grow on what they've already established and help them make some more money. That's what it's about, right? Exactly. Make some more money, spend some more money, go on more holidays, have, more freedom and really in the mind be able to go, for me, I've always got to be working towards something or I'm frustrated as hell. So when it comes to money, it's the number one problem with most people and arguments and all those sorts of things. So getting it sorted out is really important. You got any last thoughts on that?
Well, it's all about the planning and having an end goal, because it's, if you, like you said, you like to be working towards something. So if you know what you're working towards and you're planning and you've got this strategy in place and you can track your progress towards that goal. And like you said, it's the first, you get to the first 100,000 or the 200,000, and as you grow and grow, and then people get more, what's I'm looking for, sort of
encouragement.
And then to keep going. And it's always, we always look at that as, the lofty goal is to retire, whatever age it is, and have months in income. But you look at that maybe almost not insurmountable where you are now, but it's as you work towards those and make little, and that's part of the ongoing advice, is getting to the point and saying, well, we've now got to this point, and then go to the next and help them sort of work clients towards. And I think the point you made earlier about paying something, the missed opportunity, that's intangible as well. So you don't really know what it might cost you, let's say $10,000 to get this advice. But if you don't do that, what is it really costing? You don't really know. And it could be, it's huge.
It's astronomical for most people, not everyone, because you can't guarantee for everyone. But at the end of the day, missed opportunities, inaction costs us all so much money. Like I was chatting to the lady today, and I was like, I've made mistakes.
Yeah.
I've learned by them, but we can't live in our mistakes. It's like in your car, that big mirror at the front, that's like going forward. Yeah. The little mirror at the back is like, we understand and appreciate what's happened in the past, but we don't live there. No. And, we all could have done better. We all could have done worse.
Yeah.
Right? Sure. Generally. So at the end of the day, my advice for anyone, if you're in that area that, you're doing okay, you feel like it's the right time, I'd reach out and talk to a financial planner. With us, you can book in a 15-minute call. We have a chat and see if, your position would suit us potentially. But thanks for your time today, Cole. And
thanks, Dave.
Speak on the next one.
Will do.
Cheers.